Welcome to the Outthinkers Podcast. Plug into fascinating minds and breakthrough ideas that are transforming industries and the world. I'm your host, Kyan Krippendorf, founder of Outthinker Networks, a global think tank comprised of corporate strategists, innovators, and entrepreneurs that are shaping the future of business. If this describes you, join us at outthinker.com. Now, let's dive into this week's episode.
If we understand humanity, the underlying physics of humanity, why things are the way they are, why do people behave the way they behave, then we can create interventions, exogenous shocks to the system that get people to act in a more predictable way.
That was Dr. Marcus Collins, an award-winning marketer and cultural translator, the former chief strategy officer at Wieden+Kennedy, New York, and a marketing professor at Ross School of Business at the University of Michigan. Marcus knows how to build an enthusiastic culture around brands and products and services. He ran digital strategy for the pop star Beyoncé. He worked on iTunes and Nike sports music initiatives at Apple, including Beats by Dr. Dre. He is an inductee into the American Advertising Federation's Advertising Hall of Achievement, a recipient of the Thinkers 50 Radar Distinguished Achievement Award for the idea most likely to shape the future of business management. His strategies and creative contributions have led to the launch and success of, for example, McDonald's cultural resurgence, Google's Real Tone technology, and the Made in America Music Festival. Look, to have a truly powerful brand, one that motivates customers to come back, to advocate for you, and increase their willingness to pay, it is not enough to just appeal to the functional or even emotional benefits of hiring you. You want to appeal to identity, which is to say, to culture. And as you heard in the highlighted clip, Marcus's work centers squarely on that linkage between brand and culture. In this podcast, we dive deep into his best-selling book, For the Culture, the power behind what we buy, what we do, and who we want to be. We discuss the impact of culture on consumption and how businesses can leverage this to influence behaviors. How people align behaviors with self-identity, making ideological alignments a key factor in brand adoption. Think about Apple or Nike. Some key tactics, such as targeting fringe groups to create network effects that impact behaviors organically to reach more audiences. The role that beliefs, artifacts, language, and behaviors play in shaping culture. Ladies and gentlemen, Marcus Collins. Marcus, thank you so much for making the time to be here. I know there's a lot of demands on your time, and I appreciate you being here with us.
I'm super grateful to be here. Thanks for having me.
Where are you dialing in from?
From Ann Arbor, Michigan, which is beautiful at the moment. The colors of the trees are changing. The air is crisp, but still a little bit warm. We got the sun out. Man, I'm all smiles right now.
That's
if
awesome.
Only our team were doing better. Otherwise,
right.
I'm all smiles.
Gotcha. Yeah, I hear there's a heat wave coming towards you as well. Awesome. So there's so much great content that you have out. I mean, definitely your book, For the Culture, definitely all the podcasts that you do. There's stuff on YouTube. So we're going to assume that readers have access to all of that, and we'll just play around, double click on a few things within that context.
That sounds like a good idea.
Cool. I want to start off with the definition, like what's the definition of culture? And, you talk about culture originally coming from this Latin term colere, to cultivate. And you talk about Emily Durkheim and her definition of culture. So just first to ground us on what is the definition of culture that you're coming from.
Yeah. So I look at it through a sociological lens. And, those early scholars of sociology, be it Marx, Weber, Durkheim, these guys, they studied culture by observing religion. And Emil Durkheim would talk about culture as a system of conventions and expectations that demarcate who we are and govern what people like us do. It's a system that's anchored in our identity. And because of who we are, we see the world a certain way. And because we see the world a certain way, we navigate life accordingly. And then we express ourselves through shared work. The system or systems of systems that make up our culture becomes sort of the governing operating system that informs where we go, what we do, how we style ourselves, just about every facet of social living. And this force is just so unparalleled in its disproportionate ability to influence us that it's almost shocking how little time we spend actually studying it.
That's awesome. So I want to double click on that in a moment because you mentioned systems, and that wasn't a random list. You lay out 3 specific systems, which I want to get into. But just to frame it first, maybe you could just tell us about, just give us an example of a successful effort to create or tap into a culture. I don't know if it's your work with Beyoncé or whether it is the Beats or one of those two or something else, just to bring us into the world of a successful creating of or shaping of a culture around a
Yeah,
brand.
I think, there are a few examples, but just for the sake of clarity, I think one of the best examples is probably Nike. And this is work that I didn't do, but it's just one that's it is salient enough and ubiquitous enough, pervasive enough that we can go, oh yeah, I know what that means. So Nike believes that every human body is an athlete. Big, small, short, tall, we're all athletes. And the only thing keeping us from realizing our best athletic self is us. So what does Nike tell the world? Just do it. Right? Nike doesn't talk to everybody. Nike talks to athletes, or maybe the athlete in all of us, but they talk to athletes in a very specific, nuanced way. They never talk about their value propositions of their sneakers, that you run faster, jump higher, they're more comfortable, that the leather is sourced from Italy somewhere. None of those things ever. Instead, they speak to an ideology, a belief system. And oftentimes they identify sort of the contradictions that exist in the orthodoxy, the sort of the tensions that exist in the status quo. They go, well, why is that okay? If we believe that every human body is an athlete, then athletes should be doing X, Y, and Z. They sort of subvert the orthodoxy. And this is how brands are able to leverage the power of culture to get people to adopt behavior, because the people who see the world similarly go, that's my brand. And they use the brand not just for their functionality, but they use the brand to realize their identity project, to project who they are to the world, and ergo make their culture material. So this is how a brand, a commercial entity, could leverage the power of culture, identifying people based on how they self-identify. I'm a hooper, I'm a runner, or you're a cyclist or a gymnast or a swimmer, whatever the case may be. How you identify, you see the world a certain way, right? And they engage people based on the way they see the world, their artifacts, behaviors, and language, of what it means to be that person or that moniker, and how the cultural production works. I often say this to marketers or executives in general. We spend so much time thinking about people in their demographic boxes because it makes life very easy, right? To say, women 24 to 35 or Gen Z. And I go, well, you're talking about a group of people who share an exterior commonality, but it's not the veneer, it's not the hardware that governs us. It's the software, our beliefs and ideologies, our identity that governs what people like us do. For instance, which Alex is more likely to run? Which Alex is more committed to running? Alex, who is a Gen Z, demography, Alex, who likes to run, psychographics, or Alex, who is a runner, identity? Surely the latter, because people like me do something like this. Because of her, his, their identity, they therefore run. I mean, that's a powerful distinction to make.
I love it. No, this idea of identity. There's one of my favorite books is Amartya Sen, who is a Nobel Prize winner in physics. He wrote a book called Identity and Violence, and he kind of links to that violence comes from this different identities that can't exist. But if we're on the opposite side of a battlefield, but we're both dentists or we're both fathers, right? We can activate a different identity that draws a circle around the two of us. So to talk to us about these systems so that we can understand, because you've used terms like beliefs and ideologies and artifacts and behaviors and languages, but in your book, you really break it down into 3 distinct systems. Could you just help us to, like, with system 1, how we see the world?
Absolutely. So Raymond Williams is just this profound cultural scholar. He's since passed, but his work's just watershed, groundbreaking as we think about the study of culture and consumption. And Raymond Williams would talk about culture in these 3 different systems, and it's anchored in our identity. And the first system is beliefs and ideologies, right? This is the way we see the world. And the beliefs are the truths that we hold about the world, like what we believe is true. And our ideologies are the stories that we tell ourselves about the world based on those truths. And the truth of the matter is that the world isn't as objective as we would like it to be. The world is subjective based on our meaning-making lenses, our cultural frames. That's why for some, a cow is leather, for others, it's a deity, and for some, it's dinner. Which one is it? It's all those things, depending on who you are and how you see the world. For some, a rug is decor. For others, a souvenir. For some, it's a place of worship. Which one is it? It's all those things, depending on who you are and how you see the world. And because of who we are and how we see the world, we therefore navigate life accordingly. That second system is a shared way of life. If you think that a cow is a deity, then you're not eating hamburgers. You're not eating beef burgers. Your behaviors are byproducts of your beliefs, the way you see the world. And, the idea of, the way we see the world, the shared way of life, constitutes the artifacts that we don. These are the human-made objects that we use, like clothes and glasses and all the other, tangible things that we use to make our culture material. Then there is behavior. This is the ceremonies, the traditions, the social norms, the unwritten rules, the things that we do, the rituals that we undergo every day. These rituals are byproducts of what we believe reality is. Those rituals often are so ingrained in us that we do them without thinking. Someone says, all the time, if I'm checking in somewhere at the airport and they go, "Have a good trip." I go, "You too." I mean, "Oh, sorry, I know you're not flying."
Right.
It's just so ingrained. That response is so ingrained, which leads to the other way by which we share a way of life, which is the language. It's the shorthand. These are the vernaculars, the colloquialisms. It's being able to understand what these things mean. To understand what these mean, these shorthands are a way by which we demonstrate that you're one of us. It's the difference of me saying that, "Oh man, those headphones are bad," and you know that I mean Michael Jackson bad, as opposed to, well, I guess Michael Jackson bad. But you know what I mean, right? The idea is that you know what I mean. You know the intent because you understand the nuances in the language. That is a byproduct of cultural subscription. So that's the second system. And then because of who we are, we see the world a certain way, we navigate life accordingly, and then we express ourselves through shared work, which is the third system, what Raymond Williams will refer to as cultural production. That's literature, film, music, pottery, poetry, what we eat, brands and branded products. Let's become ways by which we sort of peacock ourselves to the world because these works, these production become outward expressions of who we are. Right? They're outward expressions of inward beliefs. And the alchemy of those systems, who we are, how we see the world, shared way of life, and shared expression through cultural production, the alchemy of these systems make up our culture, which is the most powerful external force on human behavior, full stop.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I'm listening to this from two perspectives. From the external perspective, the market building or understanding the culture around a brand or product, but also internally an organization that, IBM people used to dress a certain way. I think they always had to wear a hat, the FBI, they always dressed in like the black suit with the small tie. So you have these artifacts and language, and there's vernacular. Is there an organization that you can think of that does this well internally?
Yeah, I mean, you've just laid out what my second book is all about. The first book is about consumer culture, consumption. The next book is to your point about internal culture. Indeed, there are expectations of what people like us do. If you work at, I don't know, Applebee's, you're expected to wear flair, right? If you work in advertising and someone shows up for an interview wearing a 3-piece suit, you go, "We ain't hiring her," because she's not one of us, right? The artifacts that we don become ways by which you express membership. And when people look like us and dress like us and talk like us and act like us, we go, "Oh, they must be one of us." And as a result, we find ourselves more connected to them. And this is really what culture is about. I mean, culture is a meaning-making system. As Raymond Williams would say, it's a way by which we look at a world or at the world that is random and full of meaninglessness, right? Like nothing has an inherent meaning. We see things and we give it meaning. That, like, red is a wavelength that, causes your eye to see a certain color. But if you see red at a stop sign or at an intersection, red means stop. And does red inherently mean stop? No, but we have negotiated as such, right? So the world around us is inherently meaningless. And it's through our cultural lenses that we make sense of the world, that we make meaning of the world. And ergo, we navigate in the world accordingly. These same mechanisms that are at play when we are in the shopping aisle, when we're in the grocery store, are the same mechanisms that are at play when we are in our organizations, because it helps us make meaning of the world and find who's with us and who's against us, who's one of us and who's not. And our brain, whose job it is to keep us alive by making predictions, it's a survival machine, as it were, that our brain finds safety in people like us. That's why we gravitate towards people like us. So when organizations have a salient culture inside of it, people end up bonding and they work better together. And if they don't bond, they go, nah, you're not one of us, man. You don't belong here. Either they don't feel like they belong, or people feel like they don't belong. Either or, those people don't stay very long. Think about companies like Elf Cosmetics is a great example of this. Elf Cosmetics, this is a 20-year-old company that is punching way above its weight, just considering the impact it has had. And by and large, it's been driven by their culture. They have their own isms. They say anything's elfing possible. This is like, we hear them talk. They use elfing in everything that they do. It's a part of their vernacular. And when you talk like an elfer, you go, oh, you must work at Elf. You're one of us. And those things go a very long way because it helps create the shortcuts that lead to greater work production.
Yeah. I'm thinking about companies I've speaked in, like in Vertex Pharmaceuticals. They call them Vertexians, and Vertexians act a certain way, and they represent a certain. So two broad questions that come out of this. Maybe we'll get both of them. One is, the first one I think maybe is easier to answer, is use the example of Nike, and I'm also thinking of Apple. And if the identity is this, it is this and not this. You are in and you are not. It seems that somehow Apple and Nike, because Nike's saying everyone's an athlete, right? So it's not a distinction between you and you. It is a distinction between you on the couch and you. How do you reconcile that? How do you create an inclusive culture that still defines what is and what isn't?
Yeah, I mean, I think Nike, in its ethos, is saying that we're all athletes, but only some of us are willing to realize it. And those are the people who should be celebrated. At one time, Nike almost exclusively celebrated, the greatest among us, right? The Michael Jordans of the world, the best athletes there were out there, from the Bo Jacksons to you name them. And then around the mid 2000s, Nike started to celebrate the athlete in us, and saying that greatness isn't a rare DNA strand. It exists in all of us, at least for those who are willing to realize it. You could probably remember the spot where the overweight, heavyset young boy is running down what looks like a sort of a Midwestern flat plain road at night. And he's just running. And there's a narration saying, greatness is in all of us, especially for those who are willing to go after it. And you could see yourself in him. Maybe you don't see yourself in LeBron James or Kobe Bryant or Michael Jordan, but you see yourself in this kid and go, yeah, I can do that. And the difference, to your point, is that's the difference between Marcus, who's on the couch watching Netflix, and Marcus, who goes out and run. Nike is for the latter.
Yeah. No, I love that. My dad, he wrote a piece, I don't know, a while ago, and he was talking about just identity, is that we have different identities. In the morning, I'm a father cooking breakfast, and later on, I'm a commuter, and then I'm a consultant, and then I'm a patron of a restaurant, right? We have different identities. So I guess that they are activating an identity within us. That's beautiful.
That's right. I mean, I love the way your dad frames that, because he's absolutely right. I mean, the truth of the matter is that we are multiple identities all at once. Like, I'm a professor. That is an individual referent, one way by which I self-identify. I'm in a fraternity, Phi Beta Sigma. That's a group referent by which I self-identify. I'm a father to little girls, a girl dad, right? That's an abstract reference by which I self-identify. And all of those monikers are at play in me at the same time. And they create some tension. Sometimes they create some contradiction. Sometimes they create, the greater output than the sum of its parts, right? These things are constantly all within us. And based upon these different ways in which you self-identify, we are constantly negotiating with these different identities internally to decide what's acceptable for people like us, right? What we might say, at the bar with our friends may be different than what we'd say in the church sanctuary with the exact same friends. We're negotiating what's acceptable, and as a result, we behave accordingly. That process, that legitimation process, is mediated by our cultural subscription.
Yes. And it seems that some cultures kind of self-police more than others. It seems like we don't have direct control. One of my favorite lines in your book is, it's very likely that the last new restaurant you visited or the last product you purchased was not directly due to an ad you saw. In some cases, you may have not even seen an ad for the show. Instead, you heard about it from someone someone you trust. So if we don't have, as a company, they're trying to create an identity to increase willingness to pay, create an identity internally, increase willingness to sell, employee engagement, loyalty. That's our value. And we don't have direct control, because I think the mindset is usually a communication plan. Let's blast out messages, what messages work, what channels, and just blast it out. How do you approach this when you don't have direct communication, or direct communication doesn't matter as much?
Yeah. I mean, the spray and pray model has been sort of how we have been conditioned to do marketing communications. Here's a market with a big market opportunity. We're going to blast them with messages, and prayerfully, God willing, inshallah, they see it. And even better, if they see it, maybe they'll consume, they'll take action. Well, we know that to be an efficient way of doing things, but it certainly isn't effective. And so to your point, a lot of the things, I'd argue most of the things that we buy isn't because we saw an ad, a marketer or a brand told us why this is so great. Instead, all our friends were doing it. Our friends were saying, hey, you need to be watching The Bear. And you go, everyone's telling me to watch The Bear, so I guess I want to watch The Bear. Not because the ads were so compelling, but because people like me do something like this. And as a result, we do it. This is the thing. This is why culture is so powerful, because we see the world through cultural lenses, and we adopt behaviors in an effort to stay in good standing citizenship with our people. So for marketers, for brands, for strategists that are trying to activate people when they don't see our messages, and that's not influencing our behavior, is to activate network effects. By activating network effects, by finding people who see the world the way you do. You activate the people who see the world the way you do. And you communicate the gospel. We believe this. We believe every human body is an athlete. And the athlete hears that and go, yes, totally. I'm going to use that spot, that messaging, that communication, not to promote Nike because I love them so much, but rather I'm going to use that communications to communicate my own identity. That's when the work, the messaging becomes cultural production, and it begins to reverberate within the population of people. Right? It's like people trust people more than any form of marketing communication, more than television, print, out of home, radio, native ads. In fact, we trust strangers more than we trust marketers, which should be super sobering for anyone bringing into the market as a marketer. Like, we trust Sexy Lover 24 from Denver more than we trust the brand we think about buying from on Amazon. Right? We trust people. So the idea then is, how do we activate people to go tell other people? Because nothing draws a crowd like a crowd. And that requires finding the collective of the willing, the people most likely to adopt behavior. And that's people who see the world the way you do.
Fascinating. So I guess where my mind immediately goes, if I'm thinking about doing this internally, is it's kind of like that adoption curve, the finding the early adopters and then and working that, right?
That's absolutely right. I mean, this is what I do. This is exactly how I illustrated it when I teach. You take the Gaussian curve, Carl Gauss, who postulated the distribution curve as we know it, so much so that we call it the normal curve, because in his estimation, this is the most accurate depiction of how value, behaviors, innovations propagate in a population. And what we typically do as business folks, strategists in particular, we go where the market opportunity is. Most of the people are in the middle, so blast the middle. And the truth of the matter is that is noisy, it's expensive, and it's saturated. And most people can't tell the difference between you and somebody else. The idea, though, is activate the people on the fringes, because those people are typically being ignored. No one's talking to them. No one sees them. And when you preach the gospel that they believe, not only do they consume, not only do they take action, but they will use your brand and go communicate their identity, and something magical happens. The network effect is activated. And everything we know of that is cool today was once weird and fringe. Everything that is now normal was once wacky and became normal, became popular by its propagation into the population.
So let me follow that path. So we, find the early adopters, the fringe. We jump the chasm, as Jeff Moore would say. We get that full adoption. And on our last podcast, we had Rebecca Homkes on, and we started getting to this, but we didn't get time to go to it. And we were talking about why do cities continue scaling and scaling and scaling, but companies, brands, products, they scale and they decline. And what she started saying was, it's because if you're from Detroit, is that right? Or right? I mean, you are Detroit, and so you will fight. And Detroit's a problem. You will fight for Detroit, right? But you won't fight for GE appliances, right? So does this help explain maybe why? And
that's right.
Yeah.
Because in most cases, we have transactional based relationships with brands, and brands have fortified that relationship. Brands, instead of telling us about what they believe, they tell us about the value propositions. You go, okay, cool. Your razor's sharper. I'll buy your razor until there's a sharper razor. Then I'm out of here. It's not a part of my identity because you have only engaged me through a categorical lens. Even though we do segmentation, we go, we're looking for people who want chunkier soup. And you go, okay, fine. You engage me through that lens. But if someone has chunkier soup than you do, then I'm going to go buy theirs. But when you engage people at an ideological level, you transcend the category. You transcend the value propositions. And now you engage me from an identity-based perspective. And that's how cities are. I'm a Detroiter through and through. Even though I lived in New York for almost 8 years, I would wear a Detroit Tigers hat every single day as a way of projecting my identity. And there are a few brands that have that level of connection with me, right? Like, I'm an Apple guy. I used to work at Apple. I love Apple products, right? And even though I have enough wherewithal to say that, look, Samsung, or let's say Android-based products, right? Android-based devices, I would say all the features and benefits that are in Apple devices were probably in Android-based devices a year prior.
Right.
Totally.
Right.
But you ain't gonna never catch me dead with an Android device in my pocket. Why? Because I'm an Apple guy. It's a part of my identity. And therefore, I consume as a way of making my cultural identity material.
Yeah, I love it. I got so many questions. We're reaching the top of our time. I'm going to ask you kind of the 15 questions. One question I think is the link between the question before this one and the question I just had. How do we link from the early to the late adoption and create that full curve of identity? And I'd like you to tell us about this Texas sharpshooter fallacy, because I think that many corporate strategists, we give logic and numbers, rationale, and tell us why that doesn't work.
Yeah, well, I mean, the Texas sharpshooter fallacy is the idea that it's easier to draw a target on something once you shot holes into the building, right? It's like it's post-rationalizing something that happened. This is why we use science. We use science to empirically identify causality and how those things affect what we see. And I think that the broader point in all of this is that if we understand humanity, the underlying physics of humanity, why things are the way they are, why do people behave the way they behave, then we can create interventions, exogenous shocks to the system that get people to act in a more predictable way. We can't get to 100% because that's not reality, right? There's randomness in the world. We can't get to 100%, but we can increase the likelihood from moving from lucky to likely by studying and understanding the behavioral sciences, why people do what they do, and they create opportunities for us to activate them accordingly, as opposed to post-rationalizing the things that only work because of happenstance.
Got it. So we need to understand that. Then what is effective then at what I'm kind of hearing you say is we got to get them to believe and then give them the rationale for why that's the right belief, as opposed to give the rationale to believe. So how do we get them to believe?
I would say to get people to get things propagating across the normal curve, to propagate across the distribution curve, I would say to start with the people who are most likely to move. I mean, the job of business is to get people to adopt behavior, right? To buy, to download, to watch, subscribe, to read. And the idea then is that, well, let's find the people that are most inclined to move. And we activate them not because of our value propositions, but because of our shared belief. And when we activate them, they'll go activate other people as a way of producing social solidarity, as a way of activating what Emil Durkheim referred to as collective effervescence, to find community, to find themselves in community. And they'll go do the hard work for us. They'll go do the convincing. They'll do the segmentation for us because we have connected with them in a way that transcends the category and speaks to who they truly are. Not the demographic boxes that we typically put people in, but who they truly are.
Love it. Yeah, I love it. Okay. This is great. I mean, there's so much more to unpeel in the book, and I really enjoyed reading it. In addition to buying the book, For the Culture, the power behind what we buy, what we do, and who we want to be. How else can people connect with you and learn from you?
Oh, you can find me on across the social web and all the social channels at Mark to the C, MarcTothec.
Love it. Marcus, thank you so much for doing the work that you do and taking some time to unpack it for us.
Super grateful.
Thank you.